That was honoring, we spent, it's really good when you get introduced and we spend like a good, a couple minutes on my mom. My mom is a legend. It's crazy. I'm going to talk about a few things this morning and it'll all be kind of coming together, but it's cool that you talked about the generations. And I had a dream about 10 months ago where I saw Jesus washing the feet of these three men, and I couldn't see I saw the backs of the men, and I saw the face of Jesus, and I walked behind Jesus, and I saw these men, and it was obviously like the age of a millennial, like it was a 30-year-old, a 48-year-old. I mean, I wasn't precise on the 48, but it just seemed like, kind of under 50, over 45, so I just threw around 48. But and then it was like this, 65-year-old, and I saw this rainbow over the three of them, and Jesus looks at me and says, Chad, I want you to begin to take notice that the next 7 years I'm going to reveal myself as the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and that I'm healing the generations. And so anyways, yeah, my mom, she's a legend, and then my grandma, her mom, she was a charismatic Catholic. We went through the whole charismatic Catholic renewal in the early 70s, and that's how my whole family got saved. My grandma did meetings with Catherine Coleman. She was this crazy intercessor. Like, my grandma is this Catholic intercessor that went to Toronto in 95, that went to like all these crazy outpourings in Europe in the mid-90s, and she would call me like I was 10 years old, and she would call me and say, Chad, I was praying for you since 2 a.m., and you're wearing a red shirt right now, and God's doing this and this and this, and I like look down, and like I'm wearing a red shirt. I mean, this is, like we're talking on the landline, it's not like we're FaceTiming or something like that. This is like, this is 1992 or 1993, So anyways, yeah, my grandma, she used to teach me how to fly in the Spirit when I was 4 years old. And she was amazing. The generations, it's just, it's pretty epic. But anyways, I'm Chad. I'm a pretty crazy guy. I do a lot of crazy stuff. And I was doing some cliff diving, and I was climbing up this rock, and I just got jammed, and my wedding ring came off and it flew down in the water. And so that happened 2 days ago. And then that's the sixth wedding ring that I've lost. And I've been trying to convince my wife that I could get a tattoo that says, it's an anchor, and it's JC, because Julia and Chad were married together, and it's an anchor, but also you got Jesus Christ in there. And, the whole anchor deal, like I grew up in the ocean, so, that makes sense. But it's still not, and I have like a whole thing. I'm sorry, I'm talking about tattoos. Anyways, I think if you want a tattoo after a good 7-10 years, you should probably get one. But, and that has been in that range. That's been about a good 10 years. So I'm almost ready to cross the line, but my wife isn't there yet. So anyways, I don't know why I'm talking about that, but my wife and I, we've been married 13 years. And our first date was pretty crazy. I took her to a nice Italian restaurant in Reading. And our first date was on Valentine's Day, so it's always good. This next Valentine's Day will be our 16th year anniversary of our first date. And so we've known each other for a long time. And I took her to this really nice, romantic, hot spot Italian restaurant, the Olive Garden in Reading. And I took her on a nice walk, and I said, hey, I want to love Jesus with all my heart and just release the kingdom of heaven on earth for the rest of my life. How's that sound to you? And we're 20 years old. And she says, yeah, that sounds amazing. And I said, well, then let's go to the emergency room, and let's go pray for some people. And so we went to the, very romantic. We went to the waiting room. There was a guy there with second-degree burns on the upper half of his body, chest, back, neck, arms. And so I approached him, and he's, waiting for the doctors. And Julia and I approached him and said, can we pray for you? And he says, sure. I put my hands on his chest. He screams out in pain. And I realized I probably shouldn't touch him. I should probably just put my hands a couple inches away. And so wisdom comes through experience. But anyways, That wasn't really at my expense, more at his expense. But anyways, so I'm praying. He goes, oh, wow, I feel this cool wind. You know, the pain's leaving, and he starts touching his chest. He starts touching his arms. Like, that doesn't hurt anymore. I'm like, are you serious? And I start touching. I'm like, does that not hurt? And he's like, no, I totally, you know. I'm like, well, let's pray for new skin. That feels like the next thing we should be praying for. And so we're praying for new skin, and the doctors come, and they're saying, hey, you got to come with us in the back. We have to run these, you know, do these procedures. And he gets to tell them what God's doing. And he goes, yeah, and ever since they've been praying a second time, I've been feeling itchy. I feel itchy all over. And the doctor's like, well, you should be feeling itchy for another couple of weeks or a month or so because that means you're getting new skin. And so it was really cool, you know, and then they took him in the back around these tests, and this lady was watching. She had a very badly sprained ankle. It was discolored, black and blue, swollen up, pretty big. And so she says, will you pray for me? And so me and Julia pray for her, and we watch the swelling decrease, the discoloration go. She gets up out of the wheelchair. She starts dancing, and then she starts worshiping Jesus, dancing. And her daughter, who's like a teenager, her like kind of jaw drops, and me and Julia just start prophesying over her, and we ask her, do you want to be best friends with Jesus? And she says, yeah, I want to know Jesus, and we are the Lord. So it was a really good first date. And it was awesome. But that's kind of what we do. I would really invite you, you know, for those that are dating, married, that you take Jesus with you on date nights. And you know, it's really, really fun. There's been a lot of times at restaurants where we just see God show up. And, you know, it's just for us, we told God anywhere, anytime, any place, you know, let's just go for it. You've got the green light, and we love watching God show up. I mean, you know, maybe I should do another date night story. Should I do another one? Okay, so this is another one. I was leaving for Australia. I was going to be gone for 10 days. We usually have a rule that I only go on a few trips a year, that I'm gone 10 days or less. I usually try not to go after more than 10 days. I don't know why I'm telling you all this, but this is some of our rules that we do. But, you know, obviously right before a 10-day trip, not going to see each other, we try to, you know, invest in some equity in the love tank, you know, just like our connection, you know, like so we were going on this date. It's like our last date night, you know, before leaving. And we do a weekly date night, Julie and I, for the last 16 years. And so anyways, when you're in Redding and you go on date night, usually like when you go to a restaurant like Moonstone or View 202, you're going to eat with like 20 of your closest friends. So we were just like, hey, let's go get some food to go, and let's go eat at the Sundial Bridge. And this is like in February, it's wintertime, it's not like super crowded Sundial Bridge, and there's two kind of parking lots in the Sundial Bridge. And so we took the one that was less traveled, you know, no one's really parked there. And we're getting ready, we're eating our Chipotle. And so we're, you know, just wanting to connect, and then we're gonna like take a walk on the Sundial Bridge. And so we're eating in our cars, you know, kind of like hunkered down there. And this white Ford Explorer pulls into the parking lot and decides to park right next to us. Like this lady had hundreds of options, and she chose right next to us. And at first I was like, what is this lady doing? It's date night. Like we just wanted to get away from everybody, you know? And I was like, wait a second, this is too crazy. This is too like coincidental that she would choose to park. Like, we have to pray for her. And so, you know, she pulls in next to the passenger seat where Julia is. And so we roll down her window, and I say, excuse me, we're on date night. And you parked right here, and we feel like God brought you here for us to pray for you. Can we pray for you? And she's like, sure. And I said, were you in a car accident 4 months ago and you hurt your neck? Do you have like severe pain in your neck? And she says, yes, I do. And so we get out of the car, we pray for her. And then I'm like, I see you as a little girl, you're 5 years old, and you're sitting on the floor of your living room, and you're watching a TV show on Africa, and you wept, and you told God, I want to go there one day. And she just starts bawling. She says, I told God this morning, if you don't speak to me, if you don't reveal that you're real, that I'm going to commit suicide. And I'm going to go on the Sundial Bridge. And she had this whole different, you know, this whole plan to execute. And it was like 8:30 at night. And she was like, at 10 p.m., I was gonna go and commit suicide. And so we just start praying for her, and she says, yeah, when I was 5 years old, I watched a TV show, all this stuff. I've always had a heart to be a missionary, and I've been running from God, and I just want to get my life right back, with God. And I'm like, well, do you have a passport? She says, no. And I said, well, here's $70. You need to only use this for a passport. It's time for you to step into your dreams. It's time for you to be moving forward, that you're not. And then this whole deal, and, God just broke out, and she got healed. So that was a date night story as well, which... it's something that we have been going after, at Bethel, that I definitely have just naturally followed suit, is that whole lifestyle Christianity, that I remember back in the early 2000s, people would approach Bill and say, hey, I want to go on your outreach ministry. And he's like, outreach ministry? We don't have, the mall ministry. We don't have a mall ministry. And he's like, well, you share that testimony of those people that got healed in the mall. And he's like, oh, yeah. Our people like to shop. And that's what's amazing, is we're living in this time where the church is being equipped, activated, that signs and wonders follow. We go to the grocery store, and I love events, because then they're invitations, they're, to awaken something in you, to cultivate into a lifestyle. I love events. But it's the learning how to make it a lifestyle where it's just what you're doing naturally, going about your day. And you're like, oh, Dad, that's what you want to do? Okay, there at the dry cleaners, at the bank, whatever it may be. I love it. Jesus. Okay, I've got a couple things to preach on, but I have a couple stuff in the back there as well. This is a thing that my mom and Heidi Baker did together. All the money for this goes towards kids, and we don't call them orphans because they're not orphans anymore. That it's the village of joy, the village of love, the village of hope, and these kids all have aunties and uncles, and they're not labeled as orphans. They're labeled as sons and daughters. And my wife and I, we've been working with Heidi since about 2006. We were ordained by Bethel and Iris Ministries in 2008. And so anyways, I love Mama Ida, and I love the crazy stuff that happens in Africa. This is a buddy of mine, Dan Bauman, who's a YWAM guy. He was in prison in Iran in the late 90s for the gospel. They gave him a double death sentence for being a CIA operative and a minister of the gospel, which he's not a CIA operative. But anyways, it was pretty crazy, his story, but his whole encounters with Jesus and the whole deal. So that's back there. And then also, this is a project that I helped my dad with, which is this thing called Revival Party Music. It's like EDM. It's a little bit of the crossing of the generations, because my dad and I, we just have this passion for music. And so I helped my dad a bit in this whole deal. And EDM, some of you are like, what in the world is EDM? But it's electric dance music, and it is kind of like a sound of a generation. And I might even talk about this a little bit, about just the identifications of the generations and, God bringing them together. I might hit on that a little bit, who knows. But anyways, it's pretty crazy, the sounds that are happening right now. That I've been studying the 60s. Am I get ahead of myself? Yeah, I should get ahead of myself. So in 2014, I had a radical encounter with the Lord. And I talked about this a little bit at the conference that you guys put on. But I'm going to kind of touch a little more into it, because it's kind of the mandate that I'm in, as just this has been this crazy assignment to pray for California. There is just there's an invitation, there's a wooing, there's an awakening that's happening in California. It's pretty epic to be a part of, and just to kind of catch the wave. And so that's the ministry that we're actually launching right now. It's called Catch the Wave. But it all came out of an encounter I had in 2014, where before the encounter, we were doing ministry in San Clemente. And it was in September of 2014, and then we were doing this conference at Everyday Church. It was an Irish church plant with Heidi Baker. It's in San Luis Obispo. And the night that we did the ministry in San Clemente, there was a tsunami warning from San Clemente to Pismo Beach, where the next day the conference was going to be at. So the two places, in the consecutive nights, they're doing a tsunami warning from point A to point B. I'm like, okay. And for years, I'd get these prophetic words because I'm the surfer. Like, I'm the surfer revivalist. I grew up in the water. I grew up in Southern California, and I've surfed, all over the planet. I love surfing. I totally discovered God surfing. And I'll maybe touch on that a little bit as well. But anyways, I remember getting all these words. There's a wave of the Spirit coming, Chad. Like, God's been, teaching you how to position yourself in the water and all this stuff. And so now I'm like, there's actual like tsunami warnings happening in the natural, where I'm staying. And I'm like, wow, like this is like an invitation. And I minister at the conference in Pismo. I drive up to Redding that night on a Sunday. I get in at like 11 o'clock. I'm a little hungry. And I'm eating some food in my kitchen, and this angel comes into the kitchen. Like, this is not normal. This has happened a few times in my life, but it's not very normal that an angel shows up in the kitchen. And so, anyways, this angel touches my heart, touches my chest, touches my heart, and then suddenly I see the Father, and he's sitting on the throne. And he says, Chad, I want you to begin to learn the language of heaven, and then how to articulate it to a generation that's never heard the gospel in their language. And he said that my heart is breaking for those that are your age and younger, that I want you to begin to intercede for them. And I'm like, okay, and he hands me this scroll. He says, your daughter will be one of the greatest mentors in your life, and your sister will be one of the greatest mentors in your life. And that your daughter will teach you how to be present and how to cultivate the presence. And so the Lord gives me these scrolls to eat. It was pretty interesting. It tasted like honey. And but these scrolls, one said authenticity, one said vulnerability, and then one said presence. And so, anyways, I went on this journey in 2014 where the Lord's like, hey, I want you to study the 60s, before the Jesus People movement. Like, what was going on in America in the 60s? What was happening with the generations, this post-war, and then you had the baby boomers that were, they were labeled rebellious or anti-American, and you had these sounds that start coming, like Bob Dylan and, all these different Jimi Hendrix, and you had Elvis Presley, and you had so many of them that grew up in the church, like James Brown or Elvis or Jimi Hendrix, or, they all grew up in the church, and they were carrying a sound for a generation. You guys doing okay? It's so interesting with the music today, like, oh, geez, okay, so I started studying music, and I started studying the sounds of the 60s and what was going on, where the drums was like the biggest controversy. It was way crazier than the electric guitar. You guys know that, right? Like, everyone in the 50s and early 60s associated drums with witchcraft. Like, that's what the witches use, like, you don't mess with the drums. And so it's so crazy to see these sounds start to come out, where I remember watching a news footage deal of this news anchor that was talking and doing the story about Woodstock, which that's how that's one of like the aha moments of a generation, right? Was Woodstock. And they were doing there was this anchorman, and he goes, all right, hey, you should check your sons or daughters' bedrooms, your teenagers. If they're not there, they're probably at this anti-American rally, and they're probably naked, on drugs, having sex with everyone, and they're burning American flags here. You better watch out. If your son or daughter comes to this, you're going to lose them forever. And so there was a lot of interesting stuff happening. But the aha moment of Woodstock was Jimi Hendrix playing the Star-Spangled Banner on his electric guitar. That was a moment of a generation saying, that's what my America is going to look like. And it's a little different, and you start seeing the sounds. So 2014, God says, I want you to go to Coachella. So you got to understand, like, I was kind of musically irrelevant. Like, I was not connected in 2014 to the level that, that I am at this point, in this juncture in my life. And I didn't realize that I was Forrest Gumping my way. My sister is 10 and a half years younger than me. So she's like a true millennial. Like, I didn't know this until 2014 oh, wow, I'm a tweener. Like, I didn't even know. I thought I was a Gen Xer.
And then I would have then I started doing studies. And I'm like, oh, wait, because I'm born in 81. So I'm like, no, I'm a millennial. Like some reports are like 80 and on are millennials. And then some are 82 and some are 83. And actually the majority of them are 83 and on are millennials. And then I found out like from 78, 79 to 83 are these guys that are tweeners, which is me. So I guess it makes sense if I'm called to build bridges with the generations. I mean, like I'm a tweener, but I understand. Like I got my first cell phone when I was 24 years old. Okay, I remember my dad got the car phone like in the late 80s, and it was it was crazy. I remember getting like my first Yahoo email, at 2000, like when I was in college. Anyways, I remember seeing Sublime in concert. I remember seeing Pearl Jam. Anyways, so I definitely connect with Gen Xers. And as Gen Xers, like we kind of get like swept under the carpet a little bit. You know what I mean? Like I remember hearing this report 4 years ago, like millennials just outnumbered, they just outnumbered the baby boomers. Like there was this like passing in the baton, this shift where the Gen Xers weren't even in the conversation, the numbers game. Like there's not that many of us, I guess, but anyways, sorry, we're going down different rabbit holes. But I found out I was a tweener, and then when I was 23, I got hired at the Vineyard in Laguna Niguel to be a young adult pastor. And so I'm like, yes, most revivals have been, happen with young adults. I'm gonna go to colleges, universities. We're gonna do prayer meetings. We're gonna just go for it, and it's gonna be amazing. And I got there, and the junior high pastor quit, and they asked me, will you be the junior high pastor as well? And I was like, dear God, no. Like junior high ministry, successful junior high ministry is putting on a movie in a padded room, giving them pizza and Ritalin, and if they're like still breathing by the end of the service, that was success. Like we didn't lose any limbs, we didn't lose any, like we're good. We didn't have any sneak off behind the trash can to make out or something like that. I mean, those were some of the junior high problems that you have to deal with, or you have the other extreme of like, oh my gosh, Chad, we need you in the room. Johnny drank 10 Monsters at once. And you're just like, oh gosh. It's like, do we need to pump his stomach? Do we need to what do we need to do? Anyways, it's the life of a junior high pastor. So I didn't want to be a junior high pastor. And the Lord's like, Chad, you need to understand, whether I put you in the nursery or the convalescent home, you're going to raise up revivalists. So start raising up revivalists. And so my first youth night, there was 2 kids. Don't despise the day of small beginnings. There's 2 kids, and I found out one of them was on fire. So I came home really encouraged that night because half my youth group was on fire. But 2 became 10, 10 became 20. After about a year or so, we had about over 100 kids. And what was awesome was the quality, that these kids were revivalists. These kids, we decorated the youth room with empty wheelchairs and crutches and the whole deal. We would do, Holy Spirit nights. We'd do prayer nights all through we would do like 48-hour prayer nights, prayer times. These kids were amazing. We had one kid walk on water at a beach baptism. It was awesome. So I was mentoring and fathering millennials without even realizing it. Oh, wow, these were... now they're in their mid-20s. And in 2014, I started realizing, oh, wow, God, you've been cultivating a heart for these guys this whole time. And I have my sister. She's, 26 right now. And so I called my sister, and I'm like, hey, I feel like we're supposed to go to Coachella. And we're supposed to just pray. I'm supposed to just go. And so the Lord's like, take dirt, take soil from the prayer chapel, and throw it on the Coachella grounds and just pray. Pray that people would just encounter me, that they would authentically encounter me. And so I did that, and I went and saw these insane bands, which is amazing, where all these people wanted to go with me and make it a huge ministry trip. And I was like, nah, I just feel like I'm supposed to just go there and just let them cut me deep. Intercession is to be connected to heaven, connected to the Father, but also be connected to the land and be connected to the people. That Jesus stood over, Jerusalem, and he wept. Some of the craziest miracles were in the highways and byways. He was with the people. The woman at the well, he was just with the people, and he was letting them cut him. He was being cut deep by the people around him. And he operated out of that place out of intercession. And it's so important that, we're in this place of prayer, that we go into different places and we understand that there's something to connect with the land, that the Lord's been telling me to go stay in like the center of a city and go and experience the city and then intercede from that place. That you'll have more authority in the four walls of the church if you go out there to whether it be concerts or whether it be crazy food places or whether it be, art museums, that you begin to let the culture begin to get in you, and that you begin to I love missions, I love anthropology, I love studying the cultures, and as an intercessor, it's a lot of fun. So I went to Coachella, and I just prayed. And, I'm watching Angus and Julia Stone, which is like folk music. And it's amazing to watch the expressions and the different music genres that came out of the 60s. And then the sound of today, whether it be psychedelic rock with Tame Impala, Glass Animals, Alt J. I don't know if anyone's knowing these bands, but there's only a few of you. Okay, that's a little scary. But anyways, you're feeling me. And then, we went and saw, these crazy bands, and I'm working with this one lady with social media, and I was telling her about this. I was like, hey, I really am trying to articulate intercession and the different creative ways of intercession. And so I was telling her about Coachella and praying for people just to encounter God, and then also that people would come to BSSM. And so I'm telling her this, and she just starts weeping. She says, Chad, I was at Coachella on mushrooms in 2014, and I encountered Jesus. I had a dream the last night of Coachella that Jesus came to me, and I threw away all my, drugs, and I just graduated third year school ministry. And so she's telling one of her friends this, and she starts crying, and she says, I'm going into first year. I was at Coachella living with my boyfriend, and it was a week later I got radically saved, recommitted my life to God, broke up with my boyfriend, and I'm going into first year school ministry. And I'm like, wow, those are okay, we need to go, to Coachella. Jesus. I'm supposed to share this video, and I have not followed suit. Are you guys doing okay? We're just going to take a little bit longer, but I'm launching this thing, Catch the Wave. So 2014 began this journey of I don't need to launch some big ministry. I'm just in this place of prayer, in this place of intercession. And in this video, I share about the dream that I had in 2016. And I had this dream, God gives me this mandate. I want you to pray for California. And you'll hear from the dream how there's this there's healing in the waters, and there's healing that's coming to California and America and the world. And I break my clavicle a month after the dream, severely break it, where I broke it in 5 places, had to do surgery. Here it comes. Had to do surgery, and they had to put a steel rod and 5 screws, and me recovering from surgery, I went out and surfed a wave called Waimea in the North Shore of Oahu, and it was about 35 foot, and I got a hernia surfing it. And so anyways, I did 2 surgeries in the span of 8 months, and pretty crazy. And that's the deal, right? God doesn't give you dreams to tease you. He gives you dreams to invite you into relationship with him. That there's mandates, there's assignments, but sometimes circumstances can throw you for a loop, and you have to there's dreams that you have to fight for. I remember Chris Valentin once told me, Chad, watch the prophetic words that you get 3 times, 4 times, 5 times, because when they're at that level of frequency or that many times that God's shining from the rooftops, that it usually when it's 3 or more times, it's a word that you're gonna have to fight for. And this is a word that I've had to fight for. And so we did, this whole ministry, Catch the Wave, is I have this dream, and you're about ready to see the video where I share the dream. But when I get woken up from the dream, this is what I don't share in the video. When I get woken up from the dream, the Lord says to me, Chad, now I'm just being a little vulnerable. I'm not going to need to put any disclaimers out there. But this is just me and my time with God. I'm 36 years old. I grew up in the prayer world. My parents, we were in the Vineyard in the 80s and early 90s, and we're part of Foursquare, part of Assemblies of God. I went to Brownsville in 99, and I remember we had prayer meetings weekly, and my grandma was this amazing intercessor, and I love intercessors. So with that in mind, I guess that was a disclaimer. me and God are talking, and I just have this whole thing about me stand-up paddleboarding, which I'm not a stand-up paddleboard guy. I'm a surfer. And there's something about innovation right now. There's something about creativity, and there's something about able to receive like new things. And sometimes that's hard for us because I've been a surfer since I was like 5 years old, and us surfers do not like stand-up paddleboards when they came out, because they get the waves before us. And at first, they were riding boards that were really big and they couldn't really do anything with the wave. And we're like, this is so frustrating. And we would like kick stand-up paddleboarders out. So me to have a dream that I'm stand-up paddleboarding Big Sur is a real big deal of like, that's not me. But I've learned to discover that God has given us higher perspectives, that when you're a surfer, you're only sitting about 2.5, 3 feet out of the water. But as a stand-up paddleboarder, you're 6 feet out of the water. And the perspective difference is ridiculous. And so anyways, I don't need to go back into all that stuff. I mean, I feel like I'm about ready to explode. And so if you haven't noticed that already, there's a lot that I would like to talk about, but I'm only going to give you a little bit of a package. So here we go. So anyways, what I was saying about Catch the Wave is the Lord said to me, Chad, when I say intercessor, what comes to your mind? I'm like, well, a woman in her mid-60s with a prayer shawl and a shofar, a couple line of Judah flags, some essential oils, maybe a sword that she got online from the movie Braveheart or Lord of the Rings. Like I love intercessors, right? And the Lord says to me, Chad, I want you, it's time for you to come out of the closet and tell people you're an intercessor. You've been an intercessor your whole life. And I want you to begin to articulate to your generation, what does intercession look like? Because I want to awaken a generation in prayer that there's so many people your age and younger that don't connect to the current model of intercession, and they're sabotaging the intercessor inside of them. But there's nutrients in those models. Like there's things for us to grab from those models. And if they're not in competition, they're not in war like of each other, but I'm going to go and just begin to model intercession by putting on these prayer worship services out in the ocean. So we're going to call them Worship on Water. Wow. So we did one of these a couple months ago in, wow. And so we did one of these in Doheny Beach, and we just went out with like 20 people, did not promote it, did not like, hey, I need like, the masses and army there. No, I just wanted to kind of just see how it goes. Let's just do some R&D. And so we just stand up paddleboard right beyond the waves. We brought out like the most, horrible guitars because we don't care if they get wet. And we just start worshiping, and people start paddling towards us. These surfers are like, is this something spiritual? Is this like a Christian thing? Is this church? Like, can we join you? 7 people get saved. A guy's leg grows out. A guy's tumor dissolves. And we put on this, I bought like 200 hot dogs and we fed people on the beach and we just ministered to them. And it was amazing. I was like, okay, and then I was training for Catch the Wave. And I was, God, Heidi Baker has a message, love looks like something. So I'm just like, intercession looks like something. I feel like I could just kill a couple of sacred cows. I think the Lord is calling the generations, like the spirit of unity is about ready to manifest in so many different dimensions, in so many different ways. The spirit of unity, one dimension is breaking that denominational spirit. Like that's probably 90% of our ammunition in the spirit of unity, which is awesome, but that's just like one dimension. The Lord is coming with unity in the areas of healing the generations. He's also coming with unity to break compartmentalization. That, I'm an intercessor, you're an evangelist, I take care of the airwaves, you are the ground troops. No. Like I had a dream over like a year and a half ago that I saw this man that was an intercessor, it was this groom, it was a wedding, and the groom was an intercessor and the woman was an evangelist. And it was this like, they were getting married together. There's this marriage of intercession and evangelism together in this season. And so Heidi has this message, love looks like something. Oh, let's just kill it. Yeah, let's just kill it. Because I'm kind of labeled the evangelist. Like I was raised by 2 evangelists. So, when you're raised by 2 evangelists, it's like being raised by a pack of wild wolves. If you could survive that, you could survive almost anything. I'm talking when I was 10 years old, I would be thrown into garbage dumps, like garbage bins that are really big for like the winos and the drug addicts. Because I was the smallest one, so they would choose me to they'd hoist me up. I was the lightest, I guess, or something. And I would just minister, like preach the gospel. And it was awesome, it was amazing. And that was kind of my rites of passage growing up, and it was pretty normal to come home in 5th grade from like my, studies and say, hey, Chad, There's a guy in your bedroom kicking heroin. Don't give him $5. He's going to stay in your room for a couple nights. I mean, that was normal at 10, 11 years old. Yeah, I discovered witchcraft, like witches and stuff, because we let a witch into our house, and she cut some of my sister's hair and was doing a seance in the middle of the night, and that's how I discovered witchcraft. So, I mean, like, you know, it's a fun stuff. It's awesome. You know, for a 10 extrovert, it was amazing. So I've always, like, naturally stepped into that evangelism deal because I was raised by evangelists, and my compassion, like my love for the world is crazy because I just love people. I mean, that's why I love the prophetic, you know, that it's about connecting with God. And, you know, when you have like a best friend, you're going to have some subject matters that are like, you know, your go-to subject matters. Like I've got some really good friends that are surfers, and we talk about surfing. I've got really good friends that, you know, we play basketball and we talk about basketball. But God's favorite subject is people. And he loves to talk about you guys. And that's why I love the prophetic, is because that's one of his favorite subjects. It's become one of my favorite subjects. And so I just love to get around people. Gosh, I'm taking way too long. Okay. Yeah. So just hitting this whole deal, because I love what you guys are doing. Like, this is one of the things, I mean, you guys are such forerunners in marrying prayer, evangelism, and just being this like kind of apostolic center, being a resource center, being a place of healing, being a place where intercession, where you're seeing the fruit. And that's going to kill disillusion, where stuff has happened in the prayer movements, where people get disillusioned or discouraged because they're stuck in the prayer room. And so I remember in 2003 being connected to, you know, and I've been a part of the boiler rooms, IHOP, all stuff. I love the different expressions of prayer. And I remember 2003 being in this, like I was in this city, and I'm not going to tell you who or what organization, it doesn't matter. So we spent like 12 hours in the prayer room, and we're just like going to town, like, God, stretch out your hand, let the harvest come, like, you know, like, get the harvest ready and the whole deal. And so we're leaving, and I'm like, oh man, I don't have a toothbrush. We got to go by the grocery store. And so me and, you know, one of the leaders, we go to the grocery store. It's like midnight, and I see this guy stocking the shelf, and I kept on hearing this drum beat, and I see this drum the size of a heart. And I'm like, man, what's up with drums? I keep on hearing this drum beat. And he goes, well, I play drums. And I say, but it's the shape of a heart, and I feel like you're about ready to hear the Father's heart for you. And like the cadence of the Father. And he just starts weeping because he was an orphan. He was adopted. And he went through like the foster care system. He went through all kinds of stuff. And I'm like, the Father wants to reveal how much he loves you. And he just starts weeping. And I'm like, this is a fish jumping in the boat. Like, he's ready to know Jesus. He's ready to like meet the creator of the universe, you know? And so I look at this guy who, like, this is his town. Like, he's like taking authority and prayed and the whole deal. And I'm like, dude, like, it would be wrong for me to like, you know, lead him to the Lord. You need to lead him to the Lord. Like, so I look at him like, dude, this is your chance. Like, this is what you've been praying for years. And he's like, dude, no, you're the evangelist. Like, it's your position, it's your function to lead him to the Lord. And I'm like, oh my God. So I led him to the Lord. I wasn't going to get into a theological debate, but I'm just saying that me growing up, like, I've seen that, and I feel like that thing is about ready to get broken. Like, I mean, it's true. I mean, in the sense of, you know, compartmentalizing, oh, this is natural, this is mundane, this is spiritual. Like, he's calling us to pray without ceasing. Like in Norway in 2006, I got asked this question, Chad, how much do you pray? Like, do you have different seasons that you pray more, you fast, all stuff? And I'm about ready to tell him, and the Lord's like, you need to tell him you pray 24/7. I'm like, God, you know my life. I do not pray 24/7. He goes, Chad, no, you don't understand. Your spirit, like, is connected to my spirit 24/7. While you're asleep, your heart is awake. That Chad, it is your responsibility to begin to engage with my spirit, that to recognize my presence every moment of your life, whether it be going to the movies, whether it be, and that's been kind of my like deal with the Lord in intercession, is I have crazy God encounters in movies. I have crazy God encounters at date night. I have crazy God encounters in all kinds of different areas of my life because he's always there. You know, we recognize his presence when we come to church, or we recognize his presence when there's a worship album, because we begin to engage, we begin to lean in, we begin to focus. But to learn how to do that at all times is the great responsibility. Jesus. Okay, I guess let's show this video. Yeah, just show this video, then we'll just, I don't know, I'm going to pray or something.
That prayer isn't restricted just to the four walls of the church. That we're called to pray without ceasing. That all of creation is groaning for the revealing of the sons of God. So there's something about getting outside. There's something about movement and prayer. There's a movement happening, and it's a movement of prayer, intercession, and evangelism. And there's a harvest that's about ready to be opened. I want to tell you that a dream that I had, where I was standing at paddleboarding Big Sur and in Central California, and I saw these two angels coming down from heaven with paddles. And they began to stir the waters around me, and I began to spin in a circle, and suddenly the air that I was breathing turned into healing. And this cloud of healing began to form, and it began to go over California and over America. And then I got awoken from the dream by hearing God's voice tell me, Chad, I want you to pray for California and America. And how I want you to do that is I want you to go down the coast of California and pray. And that you would put on prayer meetings in all the major cities, that you would begin to get the spirit of unity going with all the churches, and also begin to marry evangelism and prayer together. So we'll be doing beach outreaches, we'll be doing prayer meetings out of the water, and I just want to encourage you to just come and join us. Grab your kayak, grab your stand-up paddleboard, grab your surfboard, come and pray with us, come and hang out with us. We're going to be doing community days at the beach, and so I just want to encourage you, come, get outside, and pray with us.
Yep, that's a goat. That was a goat. So we're about ready. You know, August 17th is one of our first ones. It's gonna be Heidi Baker and me. We're at a Calvary Chapel. Like, this is pretty big to be at a Calvary Chapel. Calvary Chapel opened its doors and said, hey, we want, because what we're doing, there's a couple different arms to this deal. Is I was praying and training in Laguna Beach because I've got some long paddles ahead of me. And I was seeing garbage everywhere. And I'm like, God, begin to just show me all the different points. What does intercession look like? It's got to look like something. There's got to be touch points to intercession that's creative and all this stuff. And I was seeing garbage. I'm like, we need to do beach cleanups. And I started researching what was going on in the ocean. Like, we have the size of Texas, an island of garbage, plastics in the Pacific. So I'm working with some engineers in Seattle where we're getting one of the biggest barges, and we're going to go into that island and try to find an efficient way to get 10,000 pounds at least. But we're going to put on a worship intercession meeting out there in the island of garbage. But every catch the wave, we do a beach cleanup. Every catch the wave, we're taking, there's another deal because there's healing in the water. There's something about healing in the water. There's something about healing the land. And we're taking out, there's just different mandates, different things that I feel like the Lord's been directing us into. This is too big to kind of talk about, but there's an opioid crisis in our country. Probably drug overdoses have become the ninth biggest way that Americans are dying. That has jumped from 16, I think it was about 7 years ago they did a study, and it was the 16th, at the 16th spot. Now it's at the 9th spot. And I don't know if you're aware of what's going on in West Virginia, what's going on in Ohio, but I have a lot of friends there, a lot of pastors there, and it's crazy, but it's going on in our country. And so I just hooked up with about 500 drug rehab centers from San Diego to San Francisco, and we're taking them all out surfing. I'm working with vets that are coming back from Afghanistan and Iraq that are dealing with PTSD or, injuries from combat. We're taking them out surfing. There's 2 organizations that I'm working with right now that are rescuing girls out of sex trafficking. We're taking them out surfing. So that's a big part of what we're doing at Catch the Wave is we're bringing, people to a place where because it's one of the most authentic expressions for me where I've discovered God. When I was 5 years old, I discovered God in the water. And ever since I was a little kid, growing up and then in high school, the good times, bad times, I'd always just encounter Jesus in the water. And it was, just a place where, and then I was a place that I would sometimes take my hits of, Chad, you just want to go speak at that church because you want to go surfing, or you're just going to go to YWAM Kona because you want to go surfing. And I'm like, man, I'm just trying to steward like the mandate, that's all my life. That I worked at Hurley, when I was 18 and 19, that, there's all these different cross points. Like I've been a part of the WSL, where I've got to be a chaplain for a few professional surfers. Like, man, like that's just kind of my sweet spot. Like that's one of the authentic places of who I am with God that I'll never forget. 18 years old, being at a service, and they said, if you have passions that are not Jesus, then you need to put them on the altar. So I put surfing on the altar, and then a couple months later, a hurricane swell came in, and God's like, what are you doing? I never told you to give up your surfboard. That's one of the places that I like to encounter you. Go get that surfboard and go get the hurricane swell. It was so good. Like he was just breaking any kind of religious, deal. And I remember being a missionary in Indonesia, and we're debriefing on the airplane, and the Lord's like, what would you have done differently? I'm like, man, I really wish I would have surfed more, because I only surfed a handful of times in 4 months. And the Lord's like, Chad, I really wish you would have surfed more too, because I find pleasure in you when you surf, which is Proverbs, 12:13. Like, hope deferred makes the heart sick, but desire realized is the tree of life. And I think this is one of my greatest places of prayer is in the ocean. It's one of like my sanctuaries, my places that connect with the Lord. And I feel like the Lord is breaking a religious spirit where maybe it's horseback riding, maybe it's painting, maybe I'm talking with Lou Engle quite a bit. He's like, Chad, you realize what you're doing? You're raising up watchmen along the coastline. Like this is amazing what you're doing. And he's like, Chad, I'm having dreams where frisbees are going up and down the coast of California, and I feel like you need to anoint frisbees. And I'm like, yeah, let's do it. That's awesome. And so, anyways, we're in this pretty amazing time. Like I don't have the time to break it down of the correlating 60s and now, but we are in the beginning stages of another movement. It's pretty epic to be around. And I want to just read this book just came out. This guy, Roger Sachs, who was mentored by Lonnie Frisbee. And Lonnie Frisbee and him got together in the early 90s. And he told Roger, hey, I want you to come out with this book, but I want you to wait until it's time. And you'll know when it's time. And there's a lot of things. I don't know if you guys have ever heard my mom and dad talk about their whole Lonnie Frisbee deal, but and I don't have time to break that down. But basically, my dad got imparted in like Modesto by the House of Acts, couple and the whole deal. And Lonnie Frisbee said, there'll be a man here that's coming to look for my anointing. He'll be in his like late 40s, and it's for him, but it's for a whole generation. And so this lady came to this pastor's like afternoon. She's like, I don't know why I'm here. I'm a school teacher, but now I do know. And she prayed for my dad, and he got rocked. So anyways, yeah, I know. And then right after that, he came up with treasure hunting and the whole deal, and fire starters, which is like a pretty amazing evangelism expression. So I think something did kind of catch on him. And I remember when I moved back down to Southern California, I had a dream that, and I grew up in California. Like there is something about California roots. There's something about that, I don't know. I just feel like us California natives that it's just a time to pray for California, the soil of California. But I had a dream that I was walking through like the valley of Southern California, and I saw this castle, and I was wooed to go in there, and I go in there, and there's this like banging again, like under the ground, and it was stone. And there's no, us Californians, like we know we don't really have basements. So I'm like, what in the world's underneath there? I'm trying to figure out how to get down there. And this older person, I don't know if it was a man or a woman, this older person, was like this father, or, this, like father, mother type of figure, says, the way to get down there is through the attic. And I'm like, okay. So I went up to the attic and I found this jackhammer, and I brought it down and I jackhammer the stone and I make it in this hole. And I look down there, and there's Lonnie Frisbee, William Seymour, Amy Simon McPherson, and Catherine Coleman chained up. So I get down there, and I'm trying to get the chains loose, and then suddenly this person, the father, mother figure says, the key to free them is in the bridal suite. So I go through these hallways and check out these like bedrooms. Oh, that's not it. And suddenly this room, like this like woos me in. Like the presence of God is so strong. I even lose sight of why I'm even there. And then suddenly I see the key and I'm like, I think this is the key. And so I grab it, run down there. The key fits perfectly. I'm about ready to turn it. And I go, wait a second, who put you guys here? And these guys are fathers and mothers of past moves of God, you know, that in California. And so I'm like, who put you here? And they all look at me and they say, the church. And I go, well, you're free now. And I turn the key and the chains come unlocked and they go running through the hills of California screaming, we're free, we're free, we're free for a generation. And then I went and said, well, I think I need to go and pray at all these like spots. So I went to the Bonnie Bray house, found out that someone had just donated Catherine Coleman's pulpit to the Bonnie Bray house. And I got there and like, you know, in the Bonnie Bray house was actually 4 touch points of Amy, of William, obviously, Seymour, and Lonnie and Catherine. And it's pretty crazy because Catherine Coleman and Amy McPherson are buried in the same graveyard. And then William Seymour is in this like, you know, not very fabulous, you know, like he's just, you know, one of thousands in this LA graveyard. And then Lonnie Frisbee, because I was like, hey, I feel like I'm supposed to, this is 2005, I was supposed to redig the wells of what God has done in California. So I went on this whole like prayer assignment deal. Gosh, I haven't been able to talk about some, okay, anyways. I love like going on prayer assignments, like going on, you know, just different intercession stuff. It's just so much fun. Like intercession is ridiculously fun and it's an adventure and it's a blast. So anyways, it leads you to stories like this, where I was like, Lonnie Frisbee was the last one to check off the list and he was buried at the Crystal Cathedral. So I went there after a Don Potter meeting at like midnight and the security guards were hunting us down and we would hide in the bushes. And then we had LED light, like the flip phones. You know, this is 2005. So we had flip phones going through the graves looking for Lonnie Frisbee. And after about an hour and a half, we finally find him. I get on my knees and I'm like, God, you know, just I so honor what you did with one man and one generation. Do it again, the whole deal. And then the sprinklers come on. Like I'm like in the second minute of praying. The sprinklers come on. We all run. And I hear the Lord say, how bad do you want it? And I'm like, oh, dang. And so I went back and just got just drenched. But anyways, this is Lonnie Frisbee. This book came out, I believe, in 2015. This is book 2. It's pretty epic, and it's just basically his biography and his thoughts, and it was pretty cool with stuff that was going on. So this is him talking about the Jesus People movement, and I just feel like this is timely, and this is how I'm going to end. Man, I was going to make this legal and have a scripture to read. Well, maybe we will. But the Lord started straightening me out. This is after Lonnie gets radically saved. But the Lord started straightening me out. He led me to Chuck Smith and me together. One night, we were sharing our testimonies in the church for the first time. And at that particular point, there was a core of about 30 to 90 people attending the church. You know, this is like Calvary Chapel. I grew up down the street from like the mothership Calvary, Costa Mesa Calvary. And I used to go there on Monday nights as a kid all the time. And so we had a little church. It was about as big as the corner of this room right here. This is Lonnie Frisbee talking, by the way, at Mother's Day at the Vineyard, in the Mother's Day outpouring in 1980. So anyways, there were 15 of us praying at the altar that night, and the Spirit of God prophesied through Kay Smith and said to us, because of your praise and adoration before my throne tonight, I'm going to bless the whole coast of California. I thought, whew, she really thought of a dilly tonight. But then I thought, the whole coast of California, that's got to be God. When we started to receive the word as from God, the Spirit of the Lord fell upon us and we began to weep. And the Lord began to give people visions of that prophecy. The Lord continued on to say that it was going to move across the United States and then go into different parts of the world. That's when there were hardly any young people going to Calvary at all. From that day on, we went onto the beaches and to the parks, outreaching, taking on the Great Commission as if it depended on us, not relying on anyone else to do it, just us. I sense that we're experiencing a second wave of God. I believe that we're having an outpouring of the Holy Spirit, something similar to what I sensed back then years ago. I sense it in the atmosphere. I sense it in the eyes. I sense it in the voices of the people I hear responding to the Lord in this hour. God is moving upon you in a very blessed way. Some of you are just new to it. You're just being introduced to it. I always thought that revival would continue on and it was always going to be the same. but a revival doesn't always continue on. And I want to encourage you tonight to go on towards what God is doing. Press into it. Don't take for granted the timing or the season that we're in. One of the secrets, the reason why there were 25,000 people going to Calvary out there now is because of the mixture of things. I think it's important to hear the story. When I first met Chuck Smith and the people who went to his church, they were mostly all John Birchers. I'm not really familiar with that, but John Birchers, I guess, was a thing back then. I didn't know what a John Bircher was. I used to take communion with the Mormons. I didn't know the difference between a Jehovah's Witness and a born-again Christian. I used to invite them in and talk about Jesus. But anyway, I was an extreme leftist, marching in the peace rallies. I was against Vietnam. And here was a whole bunch of John Birchers, and they were inviting me in. And you see how much of a miracle that was to fellowship with a long-haired hippie when they believed in the John Birch Society type of doctrine, or whatever you want to call it. But it was a radical accepting, the dropping of opinions. Then it was the wisdom of the age and the zeal of the youth that was combined together. I think that if you have that flavor here, I sense that. He's talking to the vineyard. It was Yober Linda, Calvary Chapel at the time. The adults at the same time were saying, stupid kids, you don't have a brain in your head, get over here. And here these kids were coming up saying, let's see, I don't want to embrace materialism because that destroys you. And I think we ought to be a little more free about the things that we think and say. There's a new thing happening, see? But the adults were saying stupid. It's a bummer to be rejected by adults, especially when you have something to say, even if you're confused about it. So the adults weren't accepting the young people. They weren't even listening. They weren't even paying attention because the young people were saying good things. At that time, there was a combination of the wisdom of the age and the zeal of the youth, combining the cross-culture of what was going on and accepting one another in love. The young people started receiving Christ, and the old folks started to see and listen. Then the Lord started to bless. There was starting to be a momentum in what God was doing. We had a midweek service that started at 7 o'clock, and the church was filled at 4. It didn't let out until almost midnight. Kids coming from LA and Long Beach and getting back home at 1 o'clock in the morning, and their parents were saying, where were you on a Wednesday night? Oh, we went to church. Liar. Nobody can go to church from 4 o'clock to 1 o'clock. That's crazy. Well, go down there and see for yourself. The parents would come out and they would get born again. That's how we started getting the older people to come. The older people came to the Lord through their kids. It used to be the other way around in the church. The parents used to pray for the kids all the time, but this revival was bringing in the parents. I mean, it's been kind of crazy. Like, I have a friend who runs a service for those that employ millennials. You outsource this guy and their team, and they work with your millennial employees to help them become better employees. You know, like I hear stuff all the time of, oh, these millennials are entitled. These millennials are, you know, the loyalty thing is gone. I'm going to stay with one career or one, place. Like, it's just so intriguing. Yeah. But it's so important that we have conversations. It's so important that we seek understanding, that we as a church aren't known for judgment, but we're known for a people of conviction. I'm going to end with this. Jesus. So the Lord, I said this earlier, I just want to release this really quick of creative ways to do intercession. And this whole thing of surfing, it's so me, it's just who I am. So I contacted a few of my friends that are shapers, and I said, hey, listen, because I feel like the Lord's going to start giving you little mandates that you are just little creative expressions of the way that's authentically how you connect with God. And so I tell my buddies who are shapers, I'm like, hey guys, because normally if you shape me a board, it's going to say Chad Dedman, dimensions 6'4", 20 inches wide, 2.5 inches thick. I don't know if there's any surfers in the room right now, but anyways, I said, hey, don't put my name on there. I want you to put Julia, Burrell, and David on that board, the board that I ride the most. I want you to put the other board that I want you to shape this fish. I want it to be Sean Bowles. This other board, I want it to be Joaquin Evans. And then I started buying my friends' boards that have their names on it, and it's these arrows of intercession. It's these, every time I ride that board, I begin to intercede for those people that there's creative ways. So I now have 25 different boards with 25, I bought my buddy who was dealing with crazy anxiety. You know, like, and I'm telling you, anxiety is getting broken off of a generation. Like, yeah, everyone was really excited about that. But I mean, like, you need to understand, anxiety is a fun one to kill. And I've killed it. You know, like, I didn't get anxiety until I was 34 years old. 33, right when Jesus gets crucified. But anyways, I went through a season of multiple surgeries, went blind for 2 weeks. A lady stole 10 grand from us. Grandparents dying, a miscarriage, all in the span of a little bit, and I was dealing with a little bit of anxiety. And so I learned how to kill that thing. You know, like how to strengthen yourself in the Lord, how to be present. Because there is such a war right now, like, on how to be present. Dear Lord, okay, I'm getting other things that I could spend a lot of time talking about, but the Lord's been calling me to intercede. Like, I go, and I sometimes take a hit of like, oh, you're just going to that concert because it's, like, yeah, it's fun. Like, oh, okay, yes, Jesus. Can I just hit this one? Yes, because I had a dream, and I feel like I've said this is my 5th dream I've talked about in the span of 2 years. The Lord has given you dreams. The Lord has given you dreams, and their invitations, their mandates, their assignments, and that you would begin to find creative outlets to execute your dreams. And so, anyways, I have this dream. I'm walking this garden, and I see this gigantic tree, and in the base of the tree, the trunk of the tree says goodness. And I see this branch say prophetic, all these leaves on it. This branch says healer, all these leaves on it. Provider, all these leaves on it. This one branch has no leaves on it, and it says fun. It says, and God says to me, Chad, this is one of your greatest mandates, is that you would connect, that you would begin to articulate to the world and the bride of Christ how fun I am and how that's connected to me being good. And like, I'm known, yeah, thank you. I'm known as like the fun guy. You know, it's just something naturally, like, but it's not natural. It comes from a lifestyle of intentionality. You know, like, it's become easier and easier. But I've discovered that 70% of Americans struggle with how to have fun. And I've gotten so many hits of, oh, chat, like, because we are so conditioned, you can't be responsible and have fun at the same time. Like, you work hard and then you can play later, you know? Like, fun is for the weekends. Fun is for after work. Like, no, you could actually, like, have fun and be responsible. You know, so anyways, intercession is a lot of fun. And the Lord's been calling me to do like fun things in cities where I begin to connect with the people, where they cut me deep. And I could tell you story after story, but I'm gonna end with this story. I went to Denver, and we have a Hyatt card. And so there was a Hyatt right next to the church, and there was a Hyatt downtown. And I told my wife, Julie, I'm like, I need to stay at the downtown one. And so I do, and I've got a couple buddies. We get in, we go eat this amazing meal in Denver. There's just an amazing foodie spot. I mean, that's another expression of like, we are in a crazy Reformation deal right now. But anyways, that's a whole other deal. With food, with the crazy, like, you know, shows that are happening right now, and just the music. Anyways, it's a pretty epic time to be alive. It is. Coffee. So I go stay, and I'm a big jacuzzi guy. And that's another thing, another way I've killed anxiety is, you know, like knowing how to decompress, knowing how to get strength, I go on float tanks, I go to cryotherapy. I'm not saying you have to do that stuff to kill anxiety, but those things definitely help. But anyways, so I go in Denver, and I jump in this jacuzzi. It's 9:45 at night, and all these people are in the jacuzzi. I've got 2 of my buddies, and I'm like, hey, what brought you guys to Denver? What are you guys doing? Oh, we're at the LGBTQ Christian conference that, you know, like going on across the street. And I'm like, perfect. I'm in the perfect spot right now. And then I just started asking them questions. I started like, hey, what's it been like with same-sex attraction and you growing up in the church? Like, what's your experience been like? And they begin to tell me their experience, and I'm just like, oh my gosh, like, you know, some of the nightmares, some of the judgments, some of the whatever it may be, and you're just like letting it just hit you a little deeper. And then they're asking me questions. We get kicked out of the jacuzzi, and we're in the weight room. And so we're in the fitness center of this Hyatt hotel, and they started asking me questions. I'm like, hey, what's up with like March 8th? And this guy goes, that's my birthday. And I'm like, well, something happened to you 8 years old. I don't know if it's on your birthday or what, but the Father wants to heal you of something, and he wants to reveal himself as your dad. And he just starts weeping and begins to tell us some stuff that was pretty pretty crazy. And we just started the father just started pouring out, and they just started getting blasted in right next to the abductor workout machine or the curl press. And there's other guys, I want to know the Father like that. And so they just started getting hit with the Father's love in the weight room. Ended up coming to church with me the next morning. And they're getting blasted, you know Heidi Baker? And all this sort of stuff. And I'm just oh my gosh. These guys, we just gotta, it's how do we model love? How do we model love? I mean, Jesus was accused of being a drunkard. Jesus was accused where he was hanging out with the sinners of the world. We don't need to be scared. Yes, we need to be smart and strategic and connected and have people that are watching your back. But man, we need to get out there. And these guys were just man, I want to know more. Okay, hey, and they start, asking hey, can you help me? Can you disciple me? And I'm just yeah, totally. And just loving on them. That's right. I mean, isn't it crazy that Lonnie Frisbee dealt with same-sex attraction and he was catalytic, the face of a couple movements? Yeah. Could it be out of that, that movement that could be the next Lonnie Frisbees? Yeah. Come on. Where they just get rocked by God's love. Jesus. So just stand up with me. I had so much I wanted. You guys are amazing. I just kind of exploded. But I'm telling you, I just feel there is an invitation. There's an invitation for you to begin to discover, we're called to pray without ceasing. I was going to talk about Romans 8, actually, and about how creation is groaning for the revealing of the sons of God. And also the Holy Spirit, he intercedes for us and intercedes with us. There is this amazing, place of connecting and understanding. We did our stand-up paddleboard in Southern California, and the Lord's never close your eyes. I want you just to look over the mountains of Southern California, all the houses, and just pray that my spirit just crashes in, that they would know me. That they wouldn't be servants, slaves, they would know me. And so I just began to just worship. And it's one of the greatest places. I mean, I love going to Azusa Now and stadiums of 100,000 people worshiping. But there's something about going into creation where you see 10,000 trees and they're all singing the same song. They're giving glory to God. There's just something about getting in creation that just helps you connect with God. And so, just put your hand on your heart. Lord, I pray, Lord, for creative outlets. I pray, Lord, that you would just release a wave of prayer. And Lord, that it would lead us somewhere, that it would lead us into the highways and byways, Lord, that we would begin to connect to a generation, that we begin to see the healing of the generations. And Lord, I just pray for each one of us, especially whether we're millennial, Gen Xer, a tweener, a baby boomer, that we would begin to bless the generations. That we would no longer feed into all the stereotypes, all the different stuff, that we would actually see the redemptive side. Because I've seen some of these millennials are the hardest workers, they're Instagram professionals, and they spend 5 hours on a picture. It's amazing. But Lord, I pray that you would begin to teach us the language of heaven and how to articulate the gospel that's been preached for 2,000 years. The gospel that says, I want to know nothing but Jesus and him crucified, and to know the power of God. But Lord, that we would learn how to articulate it, that Chuck Smith told his family, a pastor of 50 people of a Foursquare church in Costa Mesa, he told his kids, go pick up some hitchhikers. I want to just talk to them. I want to learn their language. And they picked up Lonnie Frisbee. But it sometimes takes you getting out there, getting outside your box and just starting to ask questions, beginning to let people cut you deep where you begin to intercede. So Lord, I pray for creative ways. And Lord, that we would have a lot of fun. That intercession would not be looked upon as something that's boring or you know, it's done in certain ways. That, Lord, I pray for creative expressions of intercession. So rock us really good. Amen. Bless you guys. You guys are amazing. Thanks for letting me go over.